The icy wind beats against the siding of the house, and with each gust, the house creaks and cracks. All alone, I'm surrounded by nothing but the aspen trees and the wintry mixture of a Wisconsin winter. Each day was a new adventure, especially in the winter. Gathering firewood and hunting game was always my priority. But luckily, I've been stocked up on firewood for some while. Unfortunately, I had finished up the last few bites of the squirrel meat I had in my freezer for lunch. As each day passes, the winter becomes more and more unbearable, making hunting a difficult task and food scarce. Getting ready for an evening of hunting, I layer up in my wall and put on my warmest boots. On the way out the door, I grab my backpack and my 2 lifelines for living out here, my .308 hunting rifle and my 10mm handgun. I close and lock the door behind me and begin my trek into the woods. Nearly an hour into enduring the harsh weather, I stumble upon what appears to be fresh elk tracks. It was hard to tell because the snow and sleet mixture was quickly covering the tracks. I follow what I could see of the tracks for nearly half an hour, and eventually the tracks faded away into fresh snow. This was what made hunting in the harsh winter so difficult. You could be in the woods for a few hours and not spot any type of game. If you did find tracks, you might not even be able to track the animal, because the snow would soon cover them up. Disappointed and mildly upset, I think to myself, it was just another day I was going to have to go without dinner. It wasn't the first, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be the last. Knowing I don't have much time left until the sun started to set, and being over an hour's walk from my home, I started to make my way back to my house. The last thing I wanted to happen is to be stuck in the Wisconsin wilderness during the middle of the night, during winter. As I began to walk between the trees, I hear the bugle of a bull elk in the near distance. I stop in my tracks and crouch to see if I can spot him through the pounding snow. I remarkably can see his head and antlers peeking over the top of a small hill 150 to 200 yards out. I slipped my rifle off my shoulder and began to creep my way into a better line of fire. I kneel down by a fallen tree and mount my rifle on top of it. I glanced through the scope, trying to spot the elk, and I found him, even a little closer than what he was just 2 minutes ago. The shot was easily closer to 100 yards now, but the dense trees and the weather still made the shot a little difficult. Looking down the scope at the elk, I was patiently waiting for a clean shot. It was my one good chance to have enough meat to make it through the rest of the winter. As the elk reaches an opening, I take a few extra seconds to see if it will stand still to ensure a more accurate and lethal shot. As the elk takes a few more steps, it turns its way towards me. I click the safety off and place my finger on the trigger of my rifle, and as soon as I begin to pull the trigger, the elk begins to back up. It backs up a few yards and then stops again. Then does again. To myself, I think it has spotted me, or maybe caught my scent since the wind was blowing in its direction. Seconds later, chills cover my body, and a dense sense of fear came over me. I can feel something. Something just wasn't right. Something else is here. I pull my head away from the scope and take a quick look around me, but I see nothing but the beating snow. I peer through the scope again, and the elk is further out this time. I see something else though. A dark brown, almost black figure is crouch walking, creeping its way through the trees, like it's about to make a move on the elk. It was almost man-like, but the pure size of it would rule out any living man. I was frozen with fear. Living in the wilderness for nearly my whole life, I have never seen anything that looks remotely similar to what I saw through that scope. Only thing on my mind was to get the hell out of there. I slowly get up off my knees, and I take a look through the scope to make sure I keep an eye on this figure. It looks like it's still waiting to strike the elk. Thinking I'm in the clear, I take a step back with my right eye still looking down the scope, and I step on a branch of the falling tree I was mounting on. The cracking of the branch echoed through the woods, and the mysterious figure turns and locks onto me. It was like looking fear into its eyes. Terrified, I aim slightly away from the figure and fire off a warning shot. The bullet lands a few feet in front of it and the sound of the shot tears through the trees. Hoping I scared it off, I move the scope back over to where the figure was to see if it was still there. It wasn't. I look around for whatever it is, but I can't find it. I think I must have frightened it. I rechamber another round into my rifle, put it on safety and slip it back onto my shoulder. Stepping over the remaining branches, my heart is racing. I'm a little over an hour away from my home and light is fading quickly. The bad thing is, my home is in the direction I saw the creature and the elk. I unholster my handgun from my side and head towards the opposite end of where I saw it. It's going to take more time to get home, going around instead of straight through, but I'm not going to take any chances of encountering it. With each step, I am glancing around each side of me, with my handgun shaking with fear in my hand. I keep thinking, what will I do if I encounter this thing? Will it come after me? Will it keep its distance? Worst case scenario, I have to fight for my life. 15 rounds of hollow point is enough to take down most predators in North America. But with what I saw through my scope, my mind has its doubts. I don't even know if my rifle would take this thing down, unless it was a clean headshot, of course. But then again, my rifle is not meant for close range. My mind keeps going through what-if scenarios, only making my anxiety and fear even worse. Passing only a few hundred yards from where I saw it, just the thought of seeing it again has my heart beating out of my chest. Only thing I can do is stay on high alert and be ready for anything. The weather is starting to take a turn for the worse, and the sun is already beginning to set. The wind picks up drastically and the snow turns into a near whiteout. Barely able to see my surroundings, I press forward in the direction of my house and pray for the best. Minutes go by and I spot something I recognise. It was my deer stand, but it was not how I left it earlier in the week. The whole stand is ripped off the tree. The straps that tied it to the tree are ripped and frayed, and the ladder is bent beyond repair. My only assumption of what could have done this was that thing. I look at the ladder and say quietly to myself, if it can bend a ladder like this, imagine what it can do to an animal. Or me. I'm already frightened, but seeing this took it to a whole nother level. Luckily, I know that my deer stand is only about 25 minutes from my house. I take a quick look around the area to see if there are any fresh tracks or any indicators that this was done recently. I didn't spot any abnormal tracks, but it does appear the elk I was hunting or another elk has been through here recently. At this point, food is not my top priority. All I care about is getting back into my warm, safe house. I begin to walk faster because there is just a little bit of light left and I really don't want to have to pull out my flashlight from my backpack. Scuffling through the woods, I come up on a small creek I need to pass. Unfortunately, the stream was still open and not frozen. I holster my sidearm and descend the small decline into the creek. As I reach the centre of the water behind me, I hear a branch snap. Fearing the worst, I slowly turn around. 20 to 30 yards from the water's edge, peeking behind a tree, I can see the mysterious beast. Staring into its eyes, I can feel the chills creep up my spine. The standoff lasts only for a few seconds until the creature releases a blood-curdling scream. I quickly turn around and hurry through the rest of the creek. I race my way up the embankment and hear the creature splashing through the water behind me. Sprinting through the woods, my heartbeat echoes in my ears. I'm only a few minutes from home, but I don't know if I'm going to make it. The sound of crunching snow grows louder and louder as every second passes by. I see my house as I come running out of the woods and into the meadow. Now it was just me and this monster on a race to my house. As the cold air was chilling my lungs from breathing heavily, I unholster my handgun from my side. I get within 100 yards of my house and turn around to see where this thing was at. But I could not see much of anything because the snow was barreling down so hard. Turning back around, I reach into my pocket and pull my keys out and continue to run towards my house. Fumbling my keys in one hand, I can only think of this creature attacking me while I'm turned around, unlocking the door. After a few seconds, I am able to unlock the door and quickly get inside. Whilst closing the door, I hear the scream of the animal just in the distance. I close the door and lock the bolt and handle, but it's not like that will stop this thing from getting inside if it really wants to. I holster my pistol and slip my rifle off my shoulder and take my backpack off. I lean both on my couch. I hurry to my gun safe in my den and grab my 12 gauge and some buckshot shells and load it. Making my way back into my living room, shotgun in my right hand, I'm beyond exhausted and aching. My chest and lungs are hurting from inhaling the bitter cold during my sprint, and my legs feel lifeless. I take my handgun from my holster, lay it on the coffee table. I sit down beside my rifle and backpack on the couch and lay my shotgun across my legs. As time passes, my heavy breathing returns to normal, and I fall asleep with my hands on my shotgun. I open my eyes, and it's the next morning. To my surprise, I'm still alive. I stand up from the couch, still holding my shotgun. I go to my front door to take a step outside. I unlock and open the door to a gruesome discovery. In front of me lies an elk, with its limbs severed. The head was completely snapped backwards with its antlers digging into the snow. It looked like a murder scene, with blood staining the white snow and the limbs scattered across my front yard. Looking at the carcass, the limbs had been torn off with great strength, which the thought of that alone makes me uneasy. I can feel inside of me that this wasn't over just yet. It makes me think twice about going that deep into the woods ever again, at least for a while. My hope is that I never come into contact with it ever again. Next time, I may not be so lucky to make it home alive.